the young adults pastor and the host of our young adults podcast. And today we have another awesome guest here with us, Amanda Hopkins, here hanging out with us today. Amanda, how long have you been at the church now?
I first came to the church, it was fall of 2010, so 9.5 years.
Just a couple days ago.
Just a couple days
It was a couple
ago.
days ago. We want you to get to know Amanda a little better, so I have some like rapid fire questions for you. Okay, you ready?
Okay, yeah.
If you could have any animal as a pet, what would it be?
Well, I love cats. I'm sorry. I'm
Any
gonna get
animal,
judged for that.
any animal, and you would still pick cats?
My cat's wonderful.
Okay, whatever. We'll let that one
So
slide.
getting judged for that.
Sunrises or sunsets?
Oh, sunsets.
If you had to have either fingers for toes or toes for fingers, what would you choose?
I'm doing fingers for toes because I can wear shoes.
Good call. Me too. Anyways, that's Amanda Hopkins. This has been another episode of Young... I'm just kidding. Every week we're doing just bringing in different young adults from our church, from our community to talk about just a various different topics. Maybe you've tuned in with us before and heard us talking about other things. But today we brought Amanda in because today we want to talk about dealing with grief. You know, such a difficult thing that literally everyone can relate with, whether they've experienced grief before or not. You know, the reality is it will happen. You know, something will happen in your life that brings you grief, and you have to walk through that, whether it's losing a job or losing a loved one or facing a difficult season or whatever that is. You know, grief can come in so many different forms.
For sure.
You know, running out of ice cream, you know, when you're really craving it, all sorts of different grief that we can experience in life. But we wanted to have Amanda come in because Amanda's story is really unique in that, and you've had to walk through some things. You and your family have walked through some difficult seasons, and I want to thank you first of all for just being here, hanging out with us, sharing. Yeah. So why don't you just share a little bit of the story of what you and your family walked through a couple years ago?
So 4 years ago, my younger brother passed away. He was 22 years old, and he died in a swimming accident, and he obviously, it's a swimming accident. It's you're not prepared for it. So you're immediately thrown into all of these questions and all these emotions, really. I remember right where I was when I got the phone call, and I remember just what was going through my mind. My dad called me. I was in a movie theater, and he was like, "Mandy, you need to come home." And so I remember leaving the movie theater and then called you guys and you came and picked me up because I was not driving. But because it was a swimming accident, there were so many unknowns. There was so much we didn't know for 5 days, what the actual answers were. We didn't know that for sure he had passed. And so we spent those 5 days walking through the unknown. And then you settle into these feelings of, holy cow, what just happened? You expect to lose a sibling, I guess, maybe, but you expect that 60 years down the road, not in your 20s. And so, it was just such an interesting time. I was living with my parents at the time. Still am, actually.
Holla. Milk that as long as you can.
They're great. They're wonderful people. And, just being able to walk through all of that with them and still walking through that. So it's not hey, this happened, and then a month later, we're fine. It was I didn't go back to work for 2 weeks because I just couldn't fathom the idea of, interacting with my job. My mind was not there. And so, and there was definitely times where I went through anxiety of I can't get out of bed this morning because of the weight of this grief. Now that grief over time has spread itself out, and it still has weight, but it's not as heavy as it was then. There are moments that are heavy, but they're fewer and they're further between. So I still, we just had the 4-year anniversary of his death last week, and you still have triggers. You still have like memories, or I take the day off of work each year because as much as I love reading the posts that his friends make or family makes, it's still hard to see those and like not cry. But I think there's this reassurance. My brother loved the Lord and served him wholeheartedly, so I know he's with Jesus, and I know I will see him again, and I know he serves such a great purpose while on this earth. That makes it a little bit easier, but you still have those moments of like, what now? These plans you have, it was just him and I. And so to walk through what even in this season now are calling a new normal. We coined it new normal then too. And so, yeah, it's this new normal, trying to figure out, how do I navigate life after this drastic change? Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, and thanks for being vulnerable
Yeah,
with
of
that. I know that
course.
even 4 years later, it's still hard to talk about, right? And I remember that day getting the phone call, and Nicole and I running down to the movie theater to pick you and your friend up, and just the whirlwind of emotion, right? I mean,
Right.
it's how do you navigate mentally, something like that? You can't, right?
No, you're not prepared for that.
Yeah, you're not prepared for it. In the weeks following that, experience. I mean, well, and it was kind of drawn out, right? It was, the immediate shock,
Right.
and then the uncertainty of even
Yes.
like, we still don't know. We still
Right.
don't have any answers. We're hoping and we're believing, and we're doing all these things. What were some of the things that you remember? Just in that season, not just the week of, but the months following it. What were some of the things that you remember just helping you continue to move on?
Yeah. I was actually like thinking about this yesterday, like what really stood out, and like the number one thing was prayer. That first moment of getting out of the movie theater and going down to my car, and I remember I'm just laying on the floor of the parking garage, and my friend pulls me into the car, and she's like, "Okay, Amanda, we have to pray." And she prayed for peace. And that really set the tone for the way that we walked through that season, was peace that passes all understanding, because you can't understand the sense of peace. But I remember my parents feeling that peace when they were at the park talking with search and rescue, like complete peace, trust in the Lord, and choosing the Lord. I remember it was May 1st, and a few days later was One Voice. And I remember like my family and some friends were like, "Do you want to go to One Voice?" And I was like,
One Voice is like worship and prayer night,
yes,
right? Yeah.
yes. And I'm like, well, I basically have two options here. I can sit at home and just like be sad and wallow, and rightfully so sad.
Yeah.
But or I can choose to go and worship. And I like choosing to go to that One Voice, or any One Voice really, it was so incredible. It was just like I just knew that the Lord was there, and I knew he was with me. And so yeah, prayer and worship, definitely the things that walked me through that season. The other thing, honestly, is the community that I have. I couldn't have navigated it without godly family, godly friends that came alongside me and encouraged me. I had friends that had a similar experience, who had lost a sibling. And so talking with them and just gleaning wisdom from them, and just being so thankful for those friends that came alongside me, like gave me grace. And yeah, so definitely community. Yeah.
Well, what I think is really cool about the first two things you said, prayer and worship, is that, I think for if you don't have a solid foundation of faith, you might not even think for those to be the first two things that you do. And I think that says a lot about just the trust that you have in the Lord in the midst of a circumstance like that. And that kind of catalyzes itself. I could almost sense even as you were just mentioning it, that night that you came to the worship and prayer night, you made a choice that night. And I think that choice catalyzed how you would walk through the rest of this process, is that you were going to choose to continue to move forward. Yeah. You, instead of sitting where you were going to choose to get up and go and take steps forward. And that's really hard to do in any grieving process, let alone one as painful as this one. But it reminds me that even in the worst of moments, even in the worst of situations, even in the worst of grieving moments, we have a choice of how we respond to that thing.
Absolutely.
And when the outward circumstances are throttling us and hitting us, we still have this opportunity for an inward decision and an inward choice. And just even when you said that, I don't want to preach a sermon here, but you catalyze that in that moment of your friend choosing to pray with you, and you sitting and dwelling in that peace, and then you choosing to step out and choosing to get up out of your home where it would have been so easy and so rightfully understandable for you to stay in that moment. You chose to move forward, and I think that's just really incredible and speaks to probably anyone in any circumstance dealing with grief. At all,
any kind.
Yeah.
It's
an interesting thing because you talked a lot about the community that was around you, and for me, when my friends are dealing with different things going on in their life and they're grieving for different reasons, it's always hard to know what your role is. As a friend or as a loved one in that person's life, what it looks like to support that person. And you're always you're always nervous to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. Am I stepping over boundaries? Am I not doing enough? And that's not to put the attention on the person that is there to support the person who's grieving, but there is a role to play with that. And you've even mentioned that a couple times now of your friend who was with you in the parking lot and took some really intentional steps to care for you in that moment, and then even in the months following, and even now today, still taking opportunities to move forward. So what would you say to a person who maybe knows someone who's grieving or in the grieving process, or for anyone who has a friend or a family member in that grieving process? What would you encourage them with? What were things that stood out to you that were important that people provided you with that you would encourage people to do?
For one thing that stood out to me, probably in the first few months, was mean what you say. I guess people said a lot of grief does weird things to people, and but just be there for your friend. So if all you can offer, because maybe it's hard for you too, is to be there for them, just say, "Hey, I'm here for you. Hey, I'm praying for you." If you're there for your friends, say, "Hey, I am here for anything that you need." But then I would have people who would say things like that I hadn't spoken to in years. And they're like, "Hey, let's be friends again." And I'm like, "I'm just grieving my brother. I don't know if
I don't have time to rekindle this thing right now.
I just don't know if I have that energy right now." But and see what your friend's practical needs are too. I remember I had one friend who was at our house, and she saw that we had laundry, and she went in and she did my parents' laundry. And it's not this massive thing that she did, but we're not thinking about laundry. We had someone buy us groceries because there was a meal train, but people are like, you want like breakfast foods too, right?
Right,
Here's some
right.
eggs. And I'm like,
The,
didn't
the,
even
the
think
line
of that.
the line of lasagna became overwhelming at one point, right?
Yeah. But it's just like filling those practical needs. When have a friend who's walking through something, like I start with, hey, I'm praying for you. And then, yes, I am here for you. But then sometimes I even ask, what is a need you have right now?
That's really good.
What is a need? What is a specific?
Practically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
practically. If there's nothing, that's okay. Don't feel like you have to create something for me. But I want to be there for you if you need me. But if you don't need me, that's okay too. But yeah, if you have a friend who's walking through that, support them, of course. Pray for them and let them know that you're there if you're there. But I don't know, I would say don't commit to more than you can.
No, that's really well said, and I think you understand the heart behind a person who wants to say, "Hey, I'm here for you," but it's a really misleading thing for somebody who's hurting or who actually has real needs to hear those words and then to have those words not followed up with if they fall empty,
Yeah.
right? And to feel already like in this moment of like I just need people to rally around me, I need support. To have somebody like not support in a way that they said could be incredibly damaging,
Yeah.
hurtful. That's really good. Let's flip the question.
Okay.
So here you are 4 years after this
Yeah.
crazy incident, and you mentioned that even now you're still walking through a grieving process.
Sure.
The grieving process doesn't end with a one-time event. I think it's interesting sometimes, we think that, and I can even think of me doing this, of reaching out to a person super intentionally in the first like week, and then months down the road, it's not like in front of my face anymore.
Right.
And so I unintentionally forget about
Sure.
what's even going on. But this reality that you're even now still grieving, for a person who's grieving right now, what are things that you would really encourage them to do? Steps for them to take, encouraging words that you would give them, somebody who's walking through a difficult season, or for all of us when we walk through a difficult season of grief?
Sure. I mean, for me personally, it's still going to the Lord and still going to my friends. I would even say, see a counselor. It's
Yeah, that's good.
it's okay to go to a counselor. It's not bad at all. And to talk through that. And sometimes that's what you need. You just need to talk through it. Or you just need someone to listen. So having those friends that listen, that's incredible.
That's so good, because I think so many people often think that counseling is a sign of weakness. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's a
No.
sign of healthy recovery,
Sure.
right?
Absolutely.
It's a sign of taking the necessary steps to move you in the right direction. And sometimes you just need a person who's trained to walk you through that process. No one can plan for grieving, right?
No.
But there's people who can help you walk through it. So I
Yep.
love that you mentioned that.
Absolutely. Another thing I do, I journal. I don't know. Some people are big fans of that, others not so much, but that's how I get out like emotions I'm feeling, or because there are triggers and there are things. But yeah, that's how I've coped, is my relationship with the Lord, my relationships with people around me, and knowing that it's okay to go to them in those circumstances. And then I did see a counselor. And yeah, walking through all of that, like, grief's not easy. It's not, but I don't know, go to the Lord. Like, that's the most important thing I can think of that's gonna help you navigate that.
Yeah, and it's for those of you that might be watching who you don't have a relationship with the Lord, you don't know what that looks like. I just want to encourage you, because even in you thinking like, I don't feel like I can go to Him because I don't have this pre-existing relationship with Him, can I tell you that He is there in the midst of whatever you're walking through.
Amen.
And whether you know Him well or not, He knows you. and he wants to have that kind of personal relationship with you. And it's hard to sometimes think that, like, in a moment of grief, this is when I go to this person. But I just want to ensure you, if you're watching this, that if you do choose to go to Jesus, and you do choose to just seek him out in a simple prayer of saying, God, I need your help right now. I guarantee you that he will meet you right where you are. And I know that you felt that, and you experienced that in your life as well. Any just final things you would just share? Any things that were just like a solid building block, or something that you've really held on to in even this, like, last several years of just moving forward? It's the grieving is different now than it was.
Right.
There's going to be a different process for recovering from grief then than there is now.
Sure.
What do you do in the moments when, like, those triggers happen?
Well, I cry.
Which is good.
It's healthy. It's okay. Yeah, I cry, and I go to those people. One thing that, like, now we're a few years after that, for my grieving, with losing someone, is making sure to honor that person. I remember there was one year on my brother's birthday where I just hung out with a friend and I didn't really do anything too crazy. And at the end of the day, I just felt like, dang it, I should have done something. Like, whether it's like every year on the anniversary of his death, we get Olive Garden. It's just a tradition.
OG, baby, come on now.
It's just a tradition.
Was he a big Olive Garden guy?
Him and I actually worked at Olive Garden together.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Come on now.
It was good times. But he did love Olive Garden, so we'll do that. We'll get Olive Garden, or we'll watch his favorite movie, which is Remember the Titans. My dad bought a cherry pie this year because that was his favorite pie. Like, just like the little things, just honoring that person. And yeah, it's okay to be sad in those moments. But yeah, that's kind of what we do.
That's really good. And that's one of the things that I really love about the way that you guys have responded from this, is that you guys have been really intentional to continue the legacy. And whether, with something like dealing with loss, I think that's a really healthy way to celebrate a person's life.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I love the most about even you guys set up a 5K run
that's
in
fun.
memory of Alex, because he was a big runner. And shoot, it got me off the couch this year and running a little bit. So, but those are opportunities to celebrate and to have positive memories and thoughts of a life well lived. And just to kind of close us out, whether it's loss or any kind of grief you're walking through, I think a couple of really important takeaways that we talked about today is that you have a choice. And it might not feel like you have a choice in the moment.
No.
It might not seem like there is a choice there other than to be broken and to be disappointed and frustrated and the array of emotions that you might be feeling. But there is a choice there. And the choice might not be to, let me tell you, the choice isn't to just, like, put up a cold face and feel like it's not happening. That's not the right response. But the response is to make choices to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And to find ways of healthy healing.
Yes.
We talked about really important things like prayer and worship that are really spiritually fulfilling in that process. We talked about the importance of community and relationships, friendships, making sure that you have that community around you, or you seek out that community in your life.
Absolutely.
And then also just the reminder of simple practices to continue to walk through that grieving process. And so if you're walking through any type of grieving process, really just encourage you to find ways to take a step forward. Make the choice to take a step forward. It might not be easy at first, but moving through grief is the plan.
Yeah.
It's a process of moving through it. And it doesn't mean that there will ever be an end point. No. It's those types of things are difficult to walk through, but it does mean that you can begin to live your life in a way that honors loss, that honors loved ones, that remembers the moments of griefs that made you better because you chose to move forward. And Amanda, we want to thank you just for coming and being vulnerable and sharing. And I love the way that you have honored your brother's life, and your family has just celebrated a life really well spent.
Yeah.
And that's one of the greatest testimonies, I think, of a family is to remember something like that, and to be able to remember and celebrate a life well spent like that.
Yeah.
So we respect you guys, we honor you guys, and we're here for you guys.
Thank you.
But we want to thank you again for watching another episode of Venture Y podcast. If you have any questions, want to connect with anything that we talked about today, feel free to email us at youngadults@ourventure.church. We love you guys, and we will see you next week on another episode of Y Podcast.